My wife threw me out of the house, said I was a failure and would never become anything. I left quietly. Years later, when those same people came asking for help, I didn't open the door. I just smiled because the power was in my hands now. That night when the door closed, it wasn't loud, but something inside my chest cracked wide open. She was standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, that kind of exhaustion in her eyes that's heavier than anger. She said, "I'm done. You're not going to become anything." Then she pointed at my bag like it had already been decided. I didn't argue. I put on my shoes, left my keys on the table and walked out. The porch light was on, the neighbor's dog was barking, and my phone stayed silent in my pocket. I sat in the car and forced myself to breathe. Past due notices were shoved into the dashboard. Last month's payment was already late. I had lost my job 2 weeks earlier, and she had said I didn't try hard enough. Maybe she was tired. Maybe I was too. I started the engine and drove toward the part of the city where nobody asked questions. A 24-hour diner where the coffee was bitter but hot and no one cared how long you sat there. The next few weeks were a blur. I slept on a friend's couch, then moved into a cheap motel when I wore out my welcome. During the day I filled out applications. At night I did delivery work, driving until my eyes burned. When someone asked, "You okay?" I said, "Yeah, getting by." The truth was nothing was steady. Nothing felt safe. I kept every receipt. I saved every email in labeled folders. I learned quickly that when words turn against you, paper doesn't. I stopped calling my mother as often. When I did, she'd ask, "When are you coming home?" I'd say, "Soon." It wasn't a lie, just an incomplete truth. One evening, a stranger whose tire I helped change handed me $20 and said, "Thanks, man." It wasn't much, but in that moment, standing under a flickering streetlight, I felt useful again. Like I still had something to offer. Months later, a small company called me back. The interview was simple. The owner said, "We need someone who shows up on time and speaks straight." I nodded. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady. I rented a single room, thin walls, but the quiet belonged to me. I made coffee every morning, worked out in the evenings, and spent nights learning. I didn't make big promises to myself. I just took the next right step. When the divorce papers arrived, I placed them on the table and read them carefully. There weren't many accusations left, just exhaustion on both sides. I signed and moved forward. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. I registered a small business under my own name. Nothing flashy, just the same work I knew how to do, this time on my own terms. I made mistakes, learned from them, fixed them. I tracked every dollar like it mattered, because it did. Years passed. I moved into a better apartment, then eventually bought a small house. I got my health insurance back. I went to the dentist for the first time in years. I started calling my mother more often. Loneliness still showed up sometimes, but it didn't scare me anymore. It reminded me where I started and how far I'd come. One afternoon after work, there was a knock at my door. I checked the camera and my heart stalled for a second. It was her. Her brother stood beside her. The same seriousness on her face, but now there was something else in her eyes. Need. I didn't open the door. I turned on the speaker. She said, "We need to talk." I said, "This isn't a good time." She said, "Just 5 minutes. We need help." Her brother said something quietly behind her, his voice shaking. I stood there, breathing, years crashing into one moment. The nights I slept in my car. That sentence, "You're a failure." All of it rose up at once. I felt anger, yes, but also a strange calm. I said, "I'm sorry, but I can't." She started to speak, then stopped. Their footsteps faded down the walkway. I never opened the door. I went into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and looked out the window. The sun was setting. Somewhere down the street, another porch light turned on. I smiled, not for anyone else, just for myself. Power wasn't about shutting someone out to hurt them. Power was knowing I wouldn't abandon myself again. A few days later, I hired a young guy who needed work. He asked me, "How did you get started?" I said, quietly. He laughed. "Doesn't sound easy." I said, "It's not. But it's possible. I still keep my paperwork organized. I still show up on time. I still learn from my mistakes. And if an old truth ever knocks on my door again, I listen, but I don't let it control me. Because in the end, revenge doesn't ask for noise. It asks for one thing only, that you take your life back. And I did. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to show your support. Like the video, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who needs it. Your support keeps these real stories alive. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey.